this point, we're going to turn over to a little discussion of with our celebrity guest. And just as a way to set up, I think I told you a little bit about how we do this, but as I was thinking about teaching the 7 Habits course, I knew that, I wanted this, connection to people using 7 Habits in the real world to be part of this course. So I went back and I reached out to people that I had sort of run into or bumped into who had told me that they were 7 Habits fans, and we get to talking about how they were using it in their business or in their lives. And I collected a list of those folks, and then every quarter when I get ready to teach it, I say, well, I've got 5 weeks, 5 slots to fill of people to be celebrity guests. And quite frankly, another place, and you guys can start thinking about this in the future, I'd like maybe you guys to consider coming on and being a celebrity guest here in this class and telling people how you took the things that you learned in this class and carried them forward. And today's celebrity guest, we just happen to have a person who is just like that. He was in your seat a few years ago at this point, learning about the 7 Habits. Now, I got to say, he's a little bit of a ringer because I think his dad was deeply involved in 7 Habits. And I think his dad was one of the ones that was one of my original celebrity guests on this. But now we've got Thomas Barton, who's come here. He's at Ernst & Young. He's in their tech risk consulting business, degree in accounting from Cal Poly.
Accounting and finance.
Accounting and finance, okay. So Thomas, welcome. Thanks for being a guest tonight.
Thank you for having me.
All right, good. So Thomas, I don't have my pre-scripted questions all set out in front of me, but maybe you can just, let's just start out with having the folks get to know you a little bit. Technical risk consulting at Ernst & Young, like what is that?
Yeah, so it's always hard to describe my job to people, but essentially what I do at Ernst & Young is I work with large tech companies in the Bay Area. I am originally from Marin County and I currently live in San Jose. And we sort of jump in and help those tech clients sort of solve all their major large problems, whether that be sort of enterprise tools that they need to implement, or my team specifically helps them go from pre-IPO all the way to post-IPO in terms of their SOX compliance. And SOX, short for Sarbanes-Oxley, kind of accounting term, that kind of just makes sure that the companies and public companies have large internal controls and strong internal controls. So we go in and we validate that, and we help and work really closely with the client to make sure that their control infrastructure is.
So how big a team is this? Is there a manager of this team, or what does that look like when you go into work?
Yeah, we have a pretty large team. My sort of sub team is about 10 to 15 people, and we're all over the United States. I work with people from New York and some people in Texas and people all over. So we're all at different time zones working at home. Sometimes we all fly in, they fly into San Francisco and we'll meet up in the client office and work. So.
Oh, very cool. So so I think the next question goes, right? So you kind of learned about the 7 Habits, and you've been a celebrity guest before, and I really appreciate that. Do you integrate 7 Habits into your work, or how do you sort of see this helping you do your job, I guess?
Definitely. I mean, I think I use the 7 Habits more, in work and throughout my daily life, pretty much every day. In context of my work, a lot of the times in sort of this virtual environment, you really kind of have to raise your hand to get work and really honing in on that being proactive piece, because with such a segmented team and people all over, and your form of communication is having to reach out and schedule a Zoom call or chat somebody on Microsoft Teams or whatnot to be able to reach out to get help or work. And so you really have to raise up your hands, because you can't just tap the person next to you when you're working in person, you
Yeah.
can't just tap their shoulder and say, hey, can you help me? Or, hey, do you have any more work that I can work on? Or, you have to kind of carve your path and be a lot more proactive in a virtual environment by raising your hand and reaching out to the right people.
So I know, just sort of knowing you and sort of hanging out when you were learning this stuff, you get it, and you're a kind of a proactive guy, right? In the way you approach things. But, a team of, what'd you say, 15 or 17 folks, not everybody's proactive. So this little exercise we just did with people having to teach people these habits and things, have you had to teach people proactivity, or do you have team members who aren't quite as proactive as you would like them to be? And do you try to move them in that direction, or what does that look like?
Definitely. I think, in every team, you're going to have, people that have a strong skill set that you don't. And so, I think kind of that synergy habit, you need to sort of work together, and,
Right.
Everybody has their different skill sets that you can piece together. But on the other hand, my team specifically sort of had issues with sort of productivity on our team, and we had a lot more people, and people were charging too many hours for work that wasn't getting done. So we sort of had a think tank and had a team on site in San Francisco to figure out that core issue. And so we developed a core subgroup of our team called the high performance teams. And so what we'll do is we'll meet every month and sort of set our agenda and have our different items in which we'll try to encourage others by, setting up sprint schedules or figuring out how we can best leverage our resources and help those individuals who might be struggling sort of in this virtual environment.
Boy, as you were talking about that, I was thinking about, so how so many of the different habits would sort of play into that. Certainly, like we started with the habit one and proactivity, but, as a team, creating a vision and then setting priority schedules for what's going to get done, those are
definitely.
like ticking the list of like the 7 habits. And we're gonna be talking about, first things first, which is about, prioritization and things like that too. So do you have a favorite habit or a sort of a go-to place as far as the habits go?
I think probably, I guess I like all the habits equally. It's hard to choose one that I like the most, but probably the one that I use the most is the first seek to understand then to be understood.
Okay.
Especially in my job being people services, we're working with our client, and if I'm trying to jump to conclusions or suggest a solution for something without listening to their problem and really understanding exactly where they're coming from or where the pain points are, I can't effectively help them. So I really have to, be a very active listener and think and listen, especially sort of in the virtual environment where I have so many distractions and I'll get pings and messages and it gets really chaotic. So when I'm in a call with a client, I kind of have my pen and pencil, but I'll still write notes and I'll, ask those clarifying questions when they say something or iterate a problem. I'll just, sort of repeat that back and clarify, is this what you were talking about? Maybe rephrase it so I can pinpoint and then have those notes to go on back when sort of I try to think through that problem and tackle it. So,
it's interesting you say that. I think a lot of our celebrity guests that sort of come in and you ask them about what, their favorite habit is. And it's kind of a go-to because it's just so useful in business. I know one of the celebrity guests, Gary Hunt, who's also on our industrial technology advisory board, he talked about a similar situation going into a client with a team of people who are sort of going in, and I forget exactly, he tells the story better, but kind of the end result was sort of coming out of that meeting. He sort of had a little come to Jesus sort of meeting where he said, well, we need to talk about this habit of seeking first understand, because the team wasn't doing it right. They were, I guess in sitting with the client, everybody was sort of just throwing solutions, but they weren't really hearing, right? And that seems to be like a real danger, especially when you get smart people in the room, right?
Definitely. And I think, IDY and my team, we have a ton of Cal Poly grads and a lot of people that haven't taken this class, sort of that learn by doing methodology and very active participants in our
Right.
meetings. But, everybody kind of tries to shout over each other and outshine one another.
Yeah,
Sometimes you just have to sit back and sort of let the client talk, and then we can deliberate as a team and sort of have a
right,
unified response, and then come back to the client with one sort of or a handful of targeted solutions,
right.
rather than trying to jump the gun on
right.
that. So
Right. Okay.
we work sort of with our high performance teams, and we
Yeah.
started to do trainings every couple months. We'll sort of host a seminar, and we'll touch, and I'll bring out my habits book that I've had forever, and
Yeah,
I'll touch on some of the habits and give some insight. So
yeah, good. Well, sounds like you're still using this. So I want to encourage the students to go ahead and ask a question. Kaylee, if people want to ask a question, tell me that they're raising their hand, or if you just want to go ahead and shout out, because I got my studio is set up so that you guys are like behind my shoulder here as I look. So I'm not looking at the screen. So I'm going to continue the conversation with Thomas here, but I certainly want to get your guys' questions in if you've got them. So give me a heads up if there's something in the chat or a question that we want to bring up. Okay.
Yeah, somebody actually did ask a question. So if you want to go ahead and ask that, or if you want me to read it, then.
No, go ahead and call their name, Kaylee, so
Okay,
that we have them.
Miley?
Miley, you got a question for Thomas?
No, that wasn't a question, but
Oh, sorry. Oh
Yes.
my gosh. I should have read that first.
All right, Miley. Yeah. Did you have a question? Maybe not what you typed in, or something you want to know from Thomas?
I don't personally have, I didn't like think of a question right away, but when you're working and sometimes you're stressed out and have a lot to do, what's like an easy practice to use, like to kind of calm down and not go into reactive behavior, instead go into a proactive behavior?
Oh, great question.
Definitely.
I'm glad we pressed you on that. Thank you for that.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great question, and I luckily have supportive people around me, so that's always helpful. But if I'm faced with a difficult situation at work, usually it's because I'm sort of grinding my gears and trying to push past it, and a lot of times I just need to set what I'm doing down and take a break and look away from the screen, and go on a walk or whatever, to just dissociate a little bit from work so I can think about it with a clearer head. And so I usually every day on my work calendar, usually around 2 or 3 p.m., I have sort of a scheduled in 30-minute to an hour walk with my dog that I'll take him to the park, and I'll do laps around the neighborhood, just so that I can sort of step away from work and not sort of get into that grind of working through sort of my lunches and long hours, that sort of that burnout typically happens.
Yeah.
And so I'll always do that. If I have a meeting from 2 to 3, I'll try to schedule or reschedule it as much as possible, but I'll always take at least an hour every day to step away from the computer to sort of recharge. And if something's particularly stressful, and usually most days there is something that's sort of on my mind, then I can take that time to sort of have a clear perspective and think about it differently. So
Yeah. Yeah, it's nice to have those sort of scheduled breaks in there, so you know that it's going to stop, or you force yourself to stop, right?
definitely.
Because I get that same thing where you're just sort of going over things in your mind, and you just got to put it down at some point, right?
Mhm.
Yeah. Thanks
That's
for
really good
thanks for
advice. Thank you.
yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions from folks from Thomas at this point? Something about like how what's it like to work in the real world, or any of those kinds of things, those kind of questions. Yeah, we got a question. Molly?
Yeah, I have one. How often have you found that like your coworkers have like an understanding or know like what the 7 habits are? Like, is it a pretty popular thing to know within the workforce, or have you brought what you've like have learned in this class and like through your work, have you brought that knowledge to them?
I definitely have found that anybody in sort of a higher up leadership level has read the habits. Either there's a lot of times sort of in the corporate world where there'll be sort of these group seminars, and the habits is one of those go-to books that they'll talk about. So if you already know about that, that's a leg up. But my immediate team didn't really know a ton about the habits. So that was just a great opportunity for me to introduce a lot of these principles and come across being very smart. And they were very impressed with what I had to bring to the table. So, I think if people know about it, that's great. You can kind of work on that, and you're always kind of sharpening the saw on that aspect. But if people don't know about it, it's such a great tool to introduce to a new work environment or team, because these sort of principles can be applied in any sort of work situation, especially on your small teams or whatnot. And in my field, my sort of larger team, I'll talk about it with a client, or I'll talk about it with a coworker, and as I sort of give little mini lessons, then other people will pick up on it or pick up the book, and you'll have this sort of talking point. So while I didn't experience a lot of people sort of in my cohort that knew it, when I bring it up to sort of the upper leadership, a lot of them know it. So
yeah. Thanks, Molly, for that. Made me sort of think, one of the premises of this class, and we're trying to bring together, is the idea of, this sort of 7 habits being a sort of old foundational model that's been out there. So a lot of the upper level people sort of been familiar or exposed to it and whatnot. But then maybe a lot of the newer, maybe management trends or leadership trends, sort of build on some of those 7 habits ideas. Does your group or Ernst & Young have any like leadership models? Like, is there a go-to, like, does everybody read the same book at Ernst & Young, or is there something that
No, there really hasn't been one centralized leadership model. I think a lot of time, I can probably speak on all sort of big 4 accounting firms.
Right.
Usually it's an apprenticeship model. So, as you work up the ranks, you're sort of learning from the person directly above you. So me as a staff right now, I'm learning from my senior, and my senior's learning from their manager,
Right.
and whatnot. So you're really working closely sort of with one direct manager. And so that sort of apprenticeship model, once you've sort of mastered your skills and their skills, then you move to the next sort of level.
Yeah.
So
Do you have anybody that you're mentoring? Like,
I do. I have some Cal Poly grads that are working on my team that graduated last year and started work. So it's nice. We have a strong Cal Poly, recruitment, and that's why I'm here on campus this week doing recruiting for the Cal Poly Accounting Club. So.
So you're not recruiting for the Cal Poly Accounting?
No, I'm recruiting, for EY. But
but you're talking to the club today. So is that Thursday? So you're here through the?
Yeah, I'm here through Friday for the career fair.
Yeah. Okay. Very good. So people walk around the career fair might sort of see you there and say,
definitely.
"Hey, I saw you on Zoom on the 7 Habits class." Right?
Yeah, no, definitely. I'd be glad to talk to anybody if you're interested in consulting. Be happy to talk about it. So.
Okay. Very cool. Any other questions?
I have a question.
Yeah, go for it.
I mean, while you're recruiting or having people basically, or you're teaching people, what's a habit or what's a skill that you want them to have going into like a job basically? Or do you find that puts them or sets them apart from everyone else?
I think mostly when I am teaching the people below me, what's great is if somebody sort of in jumping into a meeting or an assignment or whatnot, that they come prepared with sort of a proposed solution, that they've sort of done the legwork, instead of just pinging me or sending me a meeting invite and come to a meeting saying, hey, I didn't know how to do this, so you weren't available for the last hour, I wasn't able to do anything. For them to come to a meeting with prepared questions, or here's my thoughts on it, I don't know if I'm right, but this is what I tried, how can I improve on this? That's always super beneficial. And I really admire the people that take a first stab at doing anything new, and even if they fail, they learn more from trying something or figuring out maybe there's a solution that even me or my manager or the senior management didn't think of that, was executed based off just trying. So really just putting that good college try in is what I always tell the staff below me, to just, give it a shot. If it doesn't work out, I'm here to sort of, be a safety net, but you'll learn a ton more if you just try a task and come prepared to a meeting with your questions, having tried to do something, than to just come unprepared. So
Yeah, great suggestion. Okay. Any other questions for Thomas at this point? Yeah, go ahead, Joe.
Hi, Thomas. So have you ran into any friction when trying to implement these 7 habits in the workplace?
I think workplace friction always occurs. I think there's always different leadership styles, and even, I have such a large team, and we have 3 sort of senior leaders, and even they, have different leadership styles, and some things, the way that we prepare some of our deliverables to the client, some people like it in PDF form and other people like it in Excel, and they'll get in sort of arguments about that and give misguided information to the people below them. So there's always sort of that conflict. But in terms of the 7 habits, I think as a broad principle, there's not that much pushback that I've seen. At least a lot of people are really open to trying something new, and it's not like you're telling them exactly how to do something. I think the habits are broad enough that people can interpret them and take a little piece away from it, rather than going to one extreme. So I haven't faced any pushback on that, but in certain leadership styles or the way something's done, I think that's inevitable in the workplace.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny you should ask that, Joe, because I was thinking about because I also teach the Lean, Six Sigma stuff, right? And there are some Lean Six Sigma haters out there. I haven't run into very many 7 habits haters. There are people that don't like to be constrained, right? So if you tell them that there's any kind of there's a kind of a structured way of sort of thinking, or these habits are there. People will fight just the fact that there's structure or that there's something written down. They don't like that. They just want to freewheel it. But yeah, but other than that, I've never seen any real bad pushback on 7 habits, I don't think. So yeah. All right, thanks, Joe. All right, so I think at this point, I'm going to go ahead and wrap up this interview and say thank you, Thomas, for spending the time to be here and traveling over here. It's great to see you again. Great to see you in person. I think the last time I saw you was on Zoom during heavy COVID in the summer or something like that. But thanks for being here. Before we let you go, though, one question we always ask of all our celebrities that come in and talk here is, you got 31 folks on the screen here. They're dying for the one piece of advice that you would give them for maybe implementing their 7 habits as they sort of go off in the world and try to be as successful as you are. So what piece of advice would you give them?
I think my piece of advice, I'm not sure if it's super 7 habits related, but would be to take advantage of every opportunity that you're given, sort of at Cal Poly and in San Luis Obispo. I think I had the fortune of being able to have most of my classes in person. I sort of graduated right as the pandemic was starting. So I saw, people that didn't sort of get a great college experience because they were virtual and they felt like they were just confined to their homes and couldn't interact with other people. I think I made so many great friends and so many lifelong connections at Cal Poly, and have been pretty successful in my work environment from Cal Poly. And so I think really my advice would be to leverage all your resources here and to talk to as many classmates as you can, be as engaged in all of your classes, because you never know who you might meet in one of your classes and how that might benefit you later. So
okay, all right, Thomas. Well, thank you very much. I guess I get to shake a real person's hand for a change.
Yeah.
Thank you for coming and being here. And let's go ahead and have everybody go ahead and snap on your video if you could. Let's give Thomas a little wave thank you kind of thing, show that we appreciate his contribution and coming here to speak to us.